Everybody, welcome back tonight. We are here tonight with Cynthia McDonald. I'm sure everybody has seen her about and seen her in dams, seen her in bees, and we're here tonight to find out a little bit more about her. So thanks everybody for again turning up and coming back to the pigsty tonight. And Cynthia, if you want to just let people know who you are and where they can find you.
Sure. Hi everybody, I'm Cynthia.
She's on the internet.
All the places. Where am I all at? Okay, so I do a socio-political show on Monday nights called The 13%, and that's on YFNA News. Matter of fact, I'm doing one tonight at 7 Central Time, so check that out. I'm also on the Damn Show. As I like to affectionately put it, the Damn Show on Friday mornings. And I usually do that on 8 a.m. Central Time. I wasn't on this Friday because I woke up and I couldn't talk. And that was very like, oh my goodness, I can't talk. You know, that's not good because I like to talk.
Yeah.
And it was a cold, you know, the cold like stuff, you know what I'm saying? So I should be back on this Friday. And where else I am on, that's pretty much the steady stuff I'm on. And then like, I'll just like jump in and do like appearances here and there. Sometimes, I do a round table on your Friendly Neighborhood Atheist. That's Ethan Michael's channel. Well, YFNA News is Ethan Michael's channel too, but sometimes like I'll jump on that one to do round tables. Mm-hmm. We recently did a round table called the Black Atheist Roundtable, and Mandiza Thomas from the Black Non-Believers, like the founder and president of the Black Non-Believers, was on there. So I was a little starstruck. I was like, oh my God, it's Mandiza. And then and also Dragnot was on there too, and I was like, oh my goodness, I love you too.
Yeah,
and yeah, Drag is great. And also my significant other was on as well. And what's really funny about that one is I had another starstruck moment because David Smalley retweeted the broadcast and talked about how my boyfriend told a story, Arthur, who also co-hosts the 13% with me on Mondays, told a story when he was young about, he asked a question of his grandmother. He said, grandmother, why does God only like white people? Or God only loved white people. And he said that was the most heartbreaking story that he have ever heard. And then he, you know, encouraged people to check it out. And I was like, oh my goodness. First off, I was like, David Smalley retweeted me. I listen to your podcast every week. And, you know, and then so like, and then like I said, follow. Then he followed back. I was like, oh my goodness. And then, but you know, and also too, like I found it like really interesting that he actually like really like gleaned onto that story, or attached to that story. And I know that I remember when he first told me that story, I was just like, yeah, that is heartbreaking, you know. And that's one of the things that got him to searching about where is God, you know, like, and why doesn't God show up in Black people's lives? And that was something too, because that was during the 50s and 60s, like, because you know, because my boyfriend's a boomer, and he saw a lot of the protest, you know, the marches and the sit-ins and things of that nature on television, and the hoses and the dogs and all that stuff, and that's what led him to ask that question in the first place. And then he asked, and then his grandmother told him to talk to the pastor of her church at the time, and they asked him, have you ever read your Bible, son? And he's like, well, no, I haven't. And he said, well, that's the problem. You need to read your Bible. And then he said, okay, I read it. He said, I read the Bible from cover to cover. And by the time I got to Revelation, I was an atheist.
Well, it is something they say the best way to make an atheist is to get them to read the Bible, you know.
These are facts.
Well, that brings me back to the startup. You have a website as well, ADOS, Health and Wellbeing. You know, or wellness.com. The links is in the description below, and it stands for Americans Descendant of Slavery. So obviously all this sort of stuff is very important to you. It drives you. What was it that brought you to the point of starting the blog and starting the website to put your message across?
So, the ADOS movement wasn't started by me per se. It was actually started by two people named Yvette Carnell and Antonio Moore. Yvette Carnell is a political commentator out of Atlanta, and Antonio Moore is an attorney from Los Angeles. So they're the ones who actually started the movement, and it was based basically on the data concerning the positionality of Black Americans that descend from chattel slavery. And they had a conference last year in October in Louisville, Kentucky, and they really talked about just a lot of the issues that Black people that primarily descend from chattel slavery go through. And one of the things that I was not privy to until much as of late is some of the statistical points, especially when it comes to health, when it comes to health disparities, when it comes to wealth, when it comes to just a lot of things that at first I didn't know. And then I was like, oh my goodness. Like, for instance, the middle Black family in America is only worth about $1,700 liquid. Black people who descend from chattel slavery primarily only hold 2.6% of the wealth in the nation. Yet they've been here since before this was a nation. The health disparities is even worse. I mean, as far as expected life expectancy, prevalency to even chronic illnesses that could be prevented, like health. What do you call that? Hypertension, diabetes, even asthma. I mean, just all these and. It's just all this stuff is just was a culmination of wow, this is really bad, you know what I'm saying? And then you even look at in lieu of the article that I wrote recently about the prevalence of violence in primarily Black communities that have mostly people who descend from chattel slavery in them, is very high, and a lot of it could be really correlated to poverty. Pervasive poverty. And so since I am a social worker, I've always been very interested in health, as far as health and well-being. And after I became a social worker, I learned about the social determinants of health that can be very integral to a person's well-being. That's besides making sure that they go to a medical doctor. So that would be education, that's housing, that's even access to other resources, food, all these particular things would be determinant of how people live, right? So I then decided that I wanted to talk about these particular issues more, and that's when I started my blog, ADOS Health and Wellness. And so I talked about identity. I talked about, I even talk about anxiety and mental assault that happened recently, especially when we saw a lot of the police and vigilante killings of Black people recently, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and George Floyd. And I think that, and even how George Floyd's death ignited, the Black Lives Matter reboot, I would say, as far as all these protests are concerned. And even I was even talking about how seeing that on television and social media and things of that nature play over and over and over again can definitely have a very anxious response for people who actually look like that, and so I had to talk about that too, and that even made me even more privy to mental health issues that are very much so prevalent in this particular population, anxiety being extremely high, and also even a more problematic issue is the lack of mental health resources in these particular communities that they could even, get to so that they can get the help that they need.
See, one thing that really stands out to me in what you've just said there is the fact that there has to be a resurgence of it. It's the resurgence of the Black Lives Matter. And looking back through, I'm from Ireland, right? So again, I'm looking at it from a different perspective. And as much as we have people of colour over here, it's obviously not the same sort of problem or population that you have in America. But when you look down through, through history, you had the women's rights movement, and then you had the gay rights movement, and things have been changed, and people have got together, and, they've actually made a difference. But the problem is, as you said, there's a resurgence. The Black Lives Matters, it comes up. It gets to the point where there is violence and there is riots and people on the streets going buck mad, and fuck all happens, in all honesty. There's very, very little change. Then people get used to it again, and then their kids grow up and go, this is fucking shit, and fight back. And the same thing happens again, and you have to have this resurgence. As much as there is racism in America, and as much as the Christians hate the gays and all this sort of thing, it is something that from an outside perspective, it has come up and it's faded away again. It's come up and it's faded away again. And there has been very, very little change, in the law, even in the population. I think with Donald Trump coming up now, it really has boiled all the worst sort of people. It doesn't mean that they're a high percentage of the population, but having someone like that at the head, obviously, you always hear the squeaky wheel, so to speak.
Sure. And one of the things that, I believe that happened when Donald Trump became president, well, a couple of things happened. One was definitely a retaliation against having a Black president previously. And then another thing that happened with his election was normalizing racial animus. Because now, you've seen like a bunch of memes previously about, like Donald Trump didn't invent racism, but he made racism, easier to talk about, or made it more overt. And that's when we see people are a bit more, what do you call it? They're more vocal about, the racism that's already existed.
Yeah, just comfortable with it and just talking about it in normal stance. They can just say these things without having to worry about what the guy over there thinks, because the man at the top says it's okay.
Yeah, and I mean, and basically it's more just like permissible, And the really funny thing now is that we have like Donald Trump, who is horrible, and we have now another person running against him who has been just as racial with his rhetoric as well, and as far as his policies that he has pushed as well. So it's kind of like, what do you do? Like, it's kind of like, how do you want to kill me? Do you want to shoot me in the head, or do you want me to, take cyanide? You know what I'm saying? So we got a problem. we got a real big problem.
Looking at it from an outside perspective and trying to be objective about the whole thing, as I think, and we can hope as best as we can now, I hope that as bad as it's got, the worse it gets, the better it can get. The worse it's get, the more it's been brought to people's light. And as bad as it is now with Donald Trump, these things have been happening, obviously, but we've got the internet now. We've got mobile phones now. Everybody can be checking things. Everybody can have videos now. We can all be kept track of. And I think showing how bad it is now, and this area that Trump has created, I think hopefully that it can be made better. This will be the last time. Hopefully we won't have to have a resurgence now, because it's been made so popular that everyone has seen it on the videos and stuff. It's been made mainstream. We've seen this now, and I hope that it's got so bad that it's a shock factor, so to speak. It's like, look, this has been going on for fucking hundreds of years. This is how bad it is. Can we actually fucking do something about it now?
Right, exactly. But the thing about it is that if
I can just say Manda has joined us, I will just pop Manda in. Thank you very much, Ped, for joining us.
Yes.
Boop. And boop.
Popping.
There we go.
Hi. Sorry, I'm icon. I'm really glad that you said that it was Trump was retaliation for having a black president. I think it was not only that, but the fact that Trump was one of the leaders of the birtherism movement and all of that. I mean, it was a real fuck you for having a black president for 8 years. And yeah, and he has spent his entire time obsessing over everything that Obama has done.
Yeah.
Reverse it all, and it's completely fucked. So.
It really does seem like it is a dig. Just I did this, but Obama did that, and I did this better than Obama. It really does bring it to the forefront. Like, I'm better than the black man, and that's the whole idea of what he's trying to put across. Again, reinforcing with the population and keeping them down. It is just keeping them down. Manda, she lives in Georgia, so I could sit back and let that woman rant for 10 minutes, 20 minutes, maybe an hour.
Bless your heart for living in the South right now.
Oh,
bless your heart.
Isn't
that some of the stuff that they say in the South? Bless your heart.
Which pretty much means fuck you, but
Yeah. These are facts. These are facts.
Me and Robert Reed did a show about how much the South fucking sucks, so...
I love Robert, by the way. Ooh, if I wish that B was in the chat, because I'm like, we need to go ahead and go back to the family, because I love Robert.
He will be on Julie the Voice show tomorrow. So why not?
You know what? I think that whole there's a whole thing that I was added to.
I know the Bees group.
Yes, and I believe that Julie the Voice actually said that, so I'm going to have to make sure that I tune into that. Hey, Julie.
Bring it back now, as I said.
Last night. Shut up. He was also on my show last night. Okay, go ahead. Now you can go.
Didn't I tell you I'd be in trouble? Should come in with an attitude. Yeah,
because of you. I am icon because of you. So.
Well, bringing it back to the guest and the topic at hand.
I can sit back while y'all fight a little bit. It's all good.
Watching actually Amanda go whenever it happened with the Aubrey. What was the guy Aubrey being
Ahmaud Arbery?
Ahmaud Arbery. Yep.
Watching Amanda actually go through that, you could tell. Even though you can't tell from her purple icon, she's a white woman, you could definitely tell that she was affected by it. And it is something that I see is a problem that is arising, that in general population and in general community, as Manda had to have Robert Reed on, so that they can talk badness about the South. And I'm having you on so we can talk about Black Lives Matter. And it is something that regardless, I'm not going to say and take away from anything that you've been through, but, there is people on our side. There's people of white skin color that want to do and want to help. And we also want to change. And it may not affect our lives as much as it affects yours, but it doesn't take away from the fact that our voice to scream and shout and to help you is definitely worth listening to as well. It is something that I'm seeing as a problem, that you can't talk about Black Lives Matter unless you are part of that experience.
And one of the things that I also say, even in this particular space, is that, it's important to have not just Black people talk about this stuff, because even if we look at the civil rights movement, especially when it started to get its ramp up, that you saw more of a different change as far as legislation when white people started working with Black people. Yeah. When you actually, even when we even go back even further to the abolition of slavery. It was prevalent white abolitionists who had a very deep hand in making sure that was accomplished. So, and also too, when I even talk about Black uplift, I say that Black uplift is not just uplift for Black people. It will actually uplift the entire country. Yeah. Because, the entire country has been dealing with issues of race and racism and institutional and systemic racism since its inception. And there are even points of, this particular institution that has been hurtful to white people as well, and other groups. So it to me, it makes more sense to say, you know what, we need to really be more, mindful of actually tearing down these particular systems, because they have been so damaging. Damaging to constituents, damaging to citizens, and also damaging to the country. Just to actually sweep people under the rug and then put them away. We need to definitely address these issues that we are constantly seeing boil up over and over again.
It's definitely something we need to get back and forth, because it isn't going to change. I find that when it comes down to any sort of these groups, whether we're talking about trans rights, whether we're talking about gay rights, whether we're talking about black rights, we all want to try and show that we solidarity. We don't have to be part of the LGBTQ community to fight for their rights. We don't have to be part of the black community to fight for their rights, because I see that it's, again, just boils down to tribalism. We like to be in our own wee cliques and we like to be together, but it causes separation, and it comes down to social. It's the people who vote and the people who are out on the streets that will make the difference, and we need to normalize these things, because it is the population that has the power. We can scream, we can shout, but at the end of the day, we are one person, and we don't want to be a particular group of one type of person shouting for rights against another type. We want everybody together, because it again will just show divide, and we just need to be more solidarity together.
Yeah, I know that it's in the nature of humans to be tribal. You're right. Yeah. We've been carting ourselves off based on last name, surname, and whatever tribe that we belong to. Before that there was actually countries and borders. But at the same time, one of the things that I see missing oftentimes when we're doing that is we're missing humanity, and what that means to actually even practice some type of a semblance of humanism.
Yeah.
And it causes when we're so focused on me, that we forget about what we're doing to somebody else, because we're so concerned about me. And even as much as yes, I fight for, I advocate for my group. I fight for a semblance of actually being a citizen, because we never had that in the United States. And yes, I'm very much so concerned about my group, but it's never to the point where I'm not concerned about how others are being, how other people are being affected, by everything that's going on as well. My humanism won't let me completely turn a blind eye to everybody's issues. But at the same time, we're still to the point where we're saying we're affected, we're dying, we're and all these particular things are on our necks, and we need that lifted.
No, it definitely is something that we need to get together. We need to make this change. And bringing it back to what you said about the humanism, we are part of the atheist community here, or whatever way people want to say it. But it is something that I find is more prevalent, is the humanism points, that we need to put through. We are all the same. Christianity does then again brings in that tribalism. It forces their beliefs down and makes everybody have to agree with them. And it just drives forward the tribalism. As you say, humanism is what drives us. We are all the same. We want to have the same equal rights that everybody has, and have the same basic beginning. There's a particular person in the chat that's pointing out that, black people have this rights and white people, what's the difference? It's not that there's different laws against, but there is white privilege. It is something that is existence there. And to quote a meme, check your privilege at the door and all that sort of stuff. You have to be aware of these things, the cost that it takes a black person to get through university, and go through that, the education, as you pointed out, the schools that's in the communities are at a lower grade than what other communities are. The money that is funded gets funded toward different places, and it does keep the whole social economic split going on in the country. If you keep them people low, you keep them under control, so to speak, and we want everybody to be at that same basic level to start with.
Right, exactly. I mean, even if we talk about, black people have this as far as like rights is concerned. I don't know exactly who said this in the chat, but I want to give like a little brief overview of race and how we even got race in the first place. You never even heard the word white or white people until 1681 in America, and that was because of a rebellion called Bacon's Rebellion that happened about 3 years previously. It was the labor force in America, or when they were still colonies, for indentured servitude rather than slavery. And even though you had like some slavery, even from people who came from different countries and tribes in Africa, it was still very much so a small portion of the population that were laborers in America. And most of these laborers were men and of European descent, whether it be from Great Britain or Ireland. And they all had contracts that said, okay, you work for a certain amount of time, and then we'll give you land at the end of your contract. Well, at first, it worked okay for the planters because a lot of the men that came over from Great Britain and Ireland would die before their contract was over because of all the diseases and infections that they could get. But after a while, they started, getting immunity. And so after a while, they weren't, even though they were finished their contracts, they lived through their contracts, but they were not getting the land that they were promised. So you had a lot of different laborers that were out of work, poor, and you also didn't have a lot of women that were there so that they could actually, have families. So they were very disgruntled. And also too, it's important to note that at that particular time, slaves and indentured servants were treated the same. And the word was shitty. So what ended up happening was a man named Nathaniel Bacon he actually, brought a lot of his grievances to the governor. His name is Governor Barkley at that time, and said, hey, we want these particular grievances addressed, and they wouldn't do it. So he started a rebellion. And the crazy thing about it is that at first he was pillaging indigenous communities so that he could take their land. But then he ended up turning his wrath onto the governmental force that was set up in Jamestown, Virginia at that time. And also what was really scary to the planters is that he ended up getting some slaves of African descent to join with him in his rebellion. So after that particular rebellion was squashed, then which a lot of it had to do with the British government having to come over and squash it. You had a series of court cases and laws that came after that actually created race. And the planters at the time said, this indentured servitude thing is not working. We need to replace that force. And then slavery became the labor force and to replace indentured servitude. And of course, the main crop of slaves came through the transatlantic slave trade, which is from Western and Central African countries. And you had that particular institution that was very much so prevalent for almost 250 years in America, only having the abolishment of slavery only lasting for like 155 years. So you have now descendants of those slaves who have only seen freedom less time than there was actually an institution of slavery. But even with that, you still had what you call Jim Crow laws that came after the abolition of slavery that was still very depressive and oppressive of that same group. So even if you actually said, okay, we're going to do civil rights laws now, right? But the civil rights laws didn't really have a big fundamental change as far as like socioeconomic status was. So you kept basically people held back for almost 355 years and then say, okay, now you can run your race. But they're starting at a very, at a point where they're not going to be able to catch up, because because they never receive like redress and repair for those particular institutions that happened in the first place.
Oh, I can totally understand that, because as we go back to it, it is a hard starting point to get from, and it is how many generations back could you be? Your great granny or your great great granny? It's
yeah.
not.
I know personally, I'm only 2 generations from slavery and 1 generation from Jim Crow.
Yeah. It is still so, and it's just because it's not happening in the generation that's now, the people of, my side, we'll use that quickly, people of my side, they've always had that freedom in through their inheritance, and because they haven't existed and they haven't been around during that, you've heard stories, you've been around that, and there's been lynchings and things like that have probably have been close to your family and things like that, and
yeah.
It's still prevalent in your life, and it's still prevalent in the actual in society, because yous were started off, but yous were given just the bare minimum. When yous originally got a vote, yous got a third of a vote. Yous weren't even considered a whole person. Amanda?
Yeah,
Brian has a question for Cynthia. Cynthia, tell the history of the Daily Atheist morning show didn't have time for in their debate. And then I have a question too.
Okay.
Do you know what he's talking about? Because I don't.
What was the question again?
Can you tell the history of what the Daily Atheist morning show couldn't get to in his debate?
Oh, I think I just did. Yeah, I think I just did. What ended up happening on the Daily Atheist is that there was very much so a miscommunication. I think that we finally got it to the end about systemic racism, because one of the points that I was trying to make was that you can't talk about systemic racism without talking about how we got race in the first place. Yeah. And he was looking more of racism in a discriminatory way, like, how can you tell systemic racism? But he was mostly talking about like small inceptions of discrimination versus it on the macro level, which was what myself and the other person, Rick, was talking about, because like, even though like individual anecdotal events of discrimination can happen, and I've been privy to it, it's not as an effect to me rather than the actual institutions, because the institutions will determine oftentimes if I can go to school or not, if I'm going to buy a house or not, where I live, what type of money I make, what type of job I'm able to get into, basically everything that rules my life will be more so determined on the race and lineage I'm part of, rather than just, I'm in America and I have opportunity to do whatever. And yes, you can, but you also have to understand that there's so many different barriers that would be prevalent, more so, in a Black American's life versus in a white American's life, or even sometimes other groups who actually have inserted themselves in this particular whole racial caste system that's in America, that will be more of a stopping point on how far one can go, or how many hoops they have to run into in order for them to get to this particular point in their life.
Well, even just if it's just something simple as you pointed out, the average Black family is only worth about £1,700 or $1,700. You've got a job now that's 10 mile away. You're going to use that job to pay for your education. You can't afford to buy a car and run a car because you don't have enough money to start with. And obviously I'm being very broad brush here, but it's an awful lot easier for a well middle class white family to buy their 17 or 18-year-old son a second-hand car so he can get back and forth, and he's running around picking up girls in it and doesn't think about it, where someone from your side of the community or someone that has been grown up in that sort of the community, they've spent a year saving to buy this banger with fucking 3 wheels on it. You know, it's an awful lot different, as it's a barrier, as you say, something that must be overcome, even just to get onto the first rung of the ladder.
Right. And that's even like, you know, I would say that I would say, like, even me personally, I'm more fortunate than some of my other counterparts in this particular group. However, I can name like different instances where those barriers were very much so, you know, inserted even in my own personal and my family's life, that there was just certain things that just was not available. I can think of one instance where my parents wanted to buy a house, and this was in 1969. And my father served 8 years in the Navy. Mm-hmm. And when he said, okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and see if I can use my GI Bill to buy my house, which a lot of veterans did, you know, ever since the GI Bill was actually offered in 1944. So he went to apply, and they said no. And he was like, why? And they said, cuz.
Yeah.
I'm being anecdotal, but you know, but there never was a real reason why he wasn't able to get, you know, the GI Bill to purchase a home. Now, I would say like a year after he originally he applied, they ended up actually using an FHA loan in order to buy the house. But it happened after the signing of the Fair Housing Act in 1968 that they were able to take advantage of that. A lot of times what happened, and this was talked about in this piece that was written by Ta-Nehisi Coates, A Case for Reparations in the Atlantic, that came out in 2014, that a lot of Black people in Chicago bought their houses on contract. It was called contract buying. And what ended up happening was that they entered into a contract with a homeowner who said, okay, you're going to pay so much amount of money per month until you pay the house off. Now, oftentimes those particular contracts were double what the actual house was worth.
Yeah.
And if you skipped a payment because of whatever happened, and you all know the shit happens, right? Mm-hmm. You will lose the house. So whatever money that you put into it, you were never able to build equity. So a lot of times people, you know, lost their houses because of this particular inequity, only because they were not even able to get a bank loan, you know? So so that definitely is just like one barrier. And I was even reading an article as of late that there's still very much so inceptions of barriers for Black Americans to even purchase a home now. And this particular article that I read came out in 2018. And and even like even if we look back at and I'm pretty sure you remember this, is it Amanda, right?
Yeah.
Is it Amanda? And you remember the housing crisis that happened in 2008?
Yeah.
And so Wells Fargo and Washington Mutual were sued because they were telling their people to actually target African American and Latino people for these upside down loans, these inflatable loans. And even if they had just as good credit or better than their white counterparts. Yeah, and you saw a whole bunch of other people losing their houses again because after a few years, their the interest rate and their mortgage that they had to pay ballooned almost like 2 or 3 times as much as they were paying previously, you know? And they were even telling people like if you were like a secretary making like $35,000 a year, then yeah, you can afford this $200,000 home. Yeah, we're gonna put you in that. No, they're not gonna be able to, you know. And of course, like she all excited because like, oh yes, I'm about to finally buy a house. I don't have to rent no more. And I mean, that would be very exciting for any person, right? But you know, at the same time, what ended up happening is that they can't afford it, they get kicked out, and you know, and it messes up their credit. So even if they're trying to go ahead and in the future and purchase another home, they're not able to do it. And
my friend Nels, this is what it's called, predatory lending.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly what it's called. And even though like and we even had like an issue with, you know, the Department of Justice not really going after the banks like they should have gone after, because a lot of these people ended up losing tons and tons of money and weren't able to recover that money so that they can, you know, get into something that's decent in their lives, and they end up going back to renting and
that's another thing as well that people don't realize is, you know, don't get me wrong, I'm not fucking well off, I'm not rich here, you know, we've all had our bad times and we've all, you know, been in them points, like, but something that people don't realize unless they've actually been there is it's more expensive to be poor. You know, you can't buy with economies of scale, you can't, you know, use the advantages of things like that. You have to live day by day. Over here,
but that's how you keep the class system, though. I mean, you keep the poor poor. That's what keeps the rich rich.
Yeah,
that's why we live, even though not technically, we live in a fucking oligarchy here in America. I have a question for you, Cynthia. Something that Math Big mentioned earlier, and I had read a couple articles on this, but I haven't actually talked to anybody about it. Do you think that the shootings of unarmed black men is the new lynching?
Oh, it's not new.
I know it's not new, but it's right. It's taking for what it once was.
Well, I would definitely say it is a form of. I call it a form of domestic terrorism, which was what lynching was. You know, and also too, like, if you're looking at the history of how we even got like police, you know, a lot of the modern police, you know, was born out of slave patrols.
Really? I did not know that.
I didn't know that myself.
Yeah, look it up. And the funny thing about slave patrols is that slave patrols were mostly made up of young men who were not landowners, and oftentimes they were kind of drafted into this particular institution. That they got paid for slave patrolling, but you know, they kind of had like no choice. They had to kind of go into it like, hey, you don't own land, you don't have really, you know, the same rights as a landowner would in America, so we're going to go ahead and put you into this. And a lot of those people and I've read this previously, that a lot of those people that were actually put into these particular slave patrols were of Irish descent. You know, no shade, Matt Pig.
Oh, that's fine. Amanda's Irish descent. Amanda is Irish descent as well, so.
You know, and I mean, and I find it kind of funny how if you look at, like, you know, some of the population makeup of people who actually hold like these jobs now, like you have a lot of people who were from Irish descent and also Italian descent that, you know, went into being police officers. And it's even funny too, that because I've even experienced this in living in Chicago, how you would even have people patrolling predominantly black areas that are of European descent. You know, they were white. And they don't live in those areas. They don't know the people. And of course, if they're already going out with their implicit biases when they are encountering these people, you're going to get certain results, like a George Floyd, like an Ahmaud Arbery, like a Breonna Taylor, like a Tamir Rice, like even a Trayvon Martin, you know? And so
well,
Go ahead.
One thing that one thing that Noel pointed out when Noel Plum was on here a couple of weeks ago is a lot of things that are changing is changing due to the demographic. As the kids grow up, and it's our kids that we need to change. It's our kids that we need to teach to not see it different. I'd mentioned before in the channel that day, last Christmas, we took the wee girl out to pick a doll. She picked a doll, and when we opened it on Christmas Day, my mother's mother said to me, "Why did you buy her a black doll?" I was like, "She picked the doll. I didn't even see a colour." It's the child wanted the doll, and that's what we need to do. That's how we need to move forward. Is the kids are our future. Is it Michael Jackson or who fucking said that? It's
one of the greatest entertainers of all time. I just like to point that out. Thank you very much. R.I.P. Michael. R.I.P. Okay.
One thing that we still experience actually over here is I'm in Northern Ireland, not actually Ireland. I'm in the north of Ireland, and making a reference back to the differences of segregation, something we still do in this country, and I think still causes problems in this country, is that they still segregate due to religion. You do have the option of sending a Catholic kid to a secular school, to a government-run school, but you don't have the option of sending a Protestant to a Catholic-run school. There is still segregation, and then on top of that, they segregate by sex and gender as well. So you have all girl Catholics on one side, all boy Catholics on the other, and then it's all mixed over here. And it is something that we need to break through over here. Definitely, I can't believe that in this day and age that we still segregate our children by that. And it's normal. It's just something that happens,
Right. And I have mixed feelings about segregating children by gender when it comes to like education. I mean, I went to Catholic school until university, and I remember like when I was in like grammar school, it was of course like boys and girls, right? Or co-ed, right? Yeah. But when I went to high school, I went to all-girl high school, and I loved it. And I think that one of the reasons why I did is because I didn't have to, I guess, compete for the boy attention per se. And I guess like I also felt like the curriculum was more so geared to how, girls or women learn versus, like a whole, like, okay, we just want to treat everybody the same way or just
I totally get what you're saying.
Yeah. But at the same time, segregation is also very much so hurtful in a way that segregation is not equal. Even though like you may hear on the macro sense, oh, separate but equal, but it's never equal, because oftentimes what ends up happening is that resources are going to be given more so to this particular group versus this particular group, or you're going to spend more on this particular school than you're going to be on this particular school. So it's never equal. And even like, I would say even after the civil rights laws and you have forced busing that happened in the 70s, and you had a bunch of parents who were from predominantly white schools that was very much so against it, because they were concerned about, and I would even argue that they were more concerned about their school being less resourced because Black children were there, rather than why do we even have to consider integrating these schools in the first place? Is because the schools that we have for Black children to be there were never equal.
No,
they were never resourced. They were never. I remember like watching. I was watching a video about this young lady. I forgot her name, but when she was very young, she was given a 5th grade book to learn from, and she was in the 7th grade, and she was like wondering like, why are my books like 2 grades behind versus like a counterpart that's not the case.
Yes.
And so there was a big push in the civil rights movement to even making sure that the curriculum and the books that was available in predominantly Black schools were at the same counterpart as the white schools, which is crazy because the people who were even living in this area, they were taxpayers. They paid, towards, making sure that the educational system was something that their children could take a part of as well. But they weren't being taught the same things, and they weren't even being taught properly because, the education books that they had were still behind. And I was even seeing reports of that still being very much so the same case to this day.
Well, the problem is us funding our schools with fucking property tax. You end up with that kind of cycle, and then you set them up for failure because if they do finally get the chance to get into college, they're too far behind, and it continues, it perpetuates the cycle. It is fucking bullshit. We absolutely need to stop funding our education system with property tax in this country.
Yes.
It is racist and it's fucked up.
It's very fucked up, and and I'm just really happy that I can be on the stream where I can say fuck and not get dinged. Anywho, so and I mean, even if you like think about the who owns property, even in America versus who doesn't, home ownership for us, if I even look at Black Americans, is extremely low, even compared to other races and other ethnic groups. It's very, very low. So if you're even looking at like the median Black family, I would even like look at like a particular neighborhood in Chicago called West Garfield Park. It is the most violent neighborhood in Chicago, but it is also very much so interesting when you look at the demographics. 43% of the population in that area lives under the federal poverty line. The median income per family is less than $25,000. So these people more than likely are not buying; they are renting. Yeah, and it's even under, and then also too, like you look at even the unemployment rate is like 18%, but it's also interesting to know that over 93% of that particular neighborhood are Black, non-Hispanic, so you can just imagine if this is a very violent area, what does the schools look like? What do and what even the investment of schools are like? There's going to be way less because you got more people in poverty, you got more people not contributing to property taxes. So of course those places are going to be under-resourced. The food deserts are high in that area. It's hard to even be able to walk to a grocery store. I mean, a grocery store.
You end up getting all of your food from gas stations and stuff, which is
not
very healthy. And
more expensive, as we said earlier. It is more expensive to be poor. My person, before I bought my house, like my rent was £420 a month. Then my mortgage was $273. There's a big difference there. Once you, and it's hard to get onto that ladder. Personally, for mine, I did take advantage of a small privilege that's over here, and I didn't have enough money for my down payment. I didn't, but I took an off-the-books loans with a Protestant credit union, we'll just call it, like a co-op sort of off-the-books bank. And again, Catholics weren't allowed to use that particular bank that ran out of an Orange Hall and things like that. But if I hadn't have got that, and they hadn't have lent me that money, I wouldn't have been able to get onto the ladder. I wouldn't have been able to buy my house. And there is only possibly maybe 3 or 4 people that I know around my age that do own. A lot of people my age, mid-30s, are still fucking renting, and that's over here, and you take that and then compound everything that you have over there. It is very, very difficult.
Yeah, man, you're not lying. I mean, like, it's just so pervasive, and I mean, like, I even think it's even telling that one of the businesses that's really highly owned, that's mostly African American, are churches. Right? Because like some people will ask, like, like why? And one of the things that we're going to be discussing on the damn show on Friday is like, this whole prevalency of Christianity that's rampant in the Black community. And one of the things that I will argue is that those particular church institutions that are solely considered like Black America or Black owned are quite high. And oftentimes it's because there are more institutions that's willing to lend or help purchase church buildings, and also two laws when you talk about tax exemption and protections over faith-based properties and things of that nature are a lot easier to access versus a person who is looking to just buy like income property. Like for the group that I'm part of, ADOS Chicago, our president was telling this particular story, a veteran who wanted to buy income property, like a 3-flat, that he wanted to have like his own apartment and like stick his family in those other apartments, and they pay him rent, right? Yeah. And so because he is a veteran, he's able to take advantage of the GI Bill and not have to pay a down payment. However, they told him that you will not be able to get income property unless you have over $12,000 in the bank just sitting there. And he was like, bitch said what? And then he was like, how? And then he was, and it makes sense, their rationale saying that, well, if you're going to purchase income property, you need to have some form of capital in order to like cover like different issues that could come up, you know, with your income property. But the majority, like I just mentioned previously, that the middle black family is worth $1,700 liquid in the United States. Yeah. So more than likely, regardless of him being a veteran and all this other stuff, he ain't gonna have $12,000 lying around. And they even told him that he couldn't even get it gifted. So even if he found like a rich black friend that said, "Yeah, I got you, bro. I'll give you $12,000 to sit in the bank. You can get your property." They was like, "Yeah, nah, you can't do that." They was like, "Wait, what?" You know. So again, these barriers, I mean, like, you know, especially when it even comes to like, you know, people just having access to wealth. I mean, it's and the thing about it is, like you just mentioned, Matthew, that, you know, the cost is high to be poor. Yeah. You know, and the thing about it is that you can't really live, I would say anywhere, but really in the United States, you cannot live like properly without wealth. You just can't.
This goes back for quite a while in our country, because you had white people coming to America and they said, "Hey, live on a farm for a year and have all of these fucking acres to yourself." But then when, you know, slaves were given freedom, they were like, "Oh, you're fucking on your own." And there was no chance for anybody to build up any wealth through the generations. And that's where most of the wealth, the white wealth in America comes from. Right.
You know, you heard of the Homestead Act, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, I got a story about that. So, I was one of a friend that I knew was telling me about a dentist that he had that actually had a practice that is not too far from where I live. And they were talking one day, and he was saying that the dentist comes from 3 generations of dentists. And he said that the way that they were able to even have the first generation go to dental school is because they had one relative that took advantage of the Homestead Act in 1862 and was able to build wealth from that one act of Congress, right? And was able to, you know, basically perpetuate wealth for the next 3 to 4 generations, just one person. And you even think about, like, okay, now, you know, they're able to pay for school out of pocket. They don't necessarily have to worry about, like, you know, the interest that you would get even from a student loan if you want to go ahead and educate yourself. You know, I didn't even think about my student loan, child. I don't even want to think about it. That motherfucker was going to stay there. And I mean, I'm a social worker too, so you can already imagine, like, you know, having a student loan, being a social worker, forget it, right? Give me my little pins. I'm just going to try to keep that motherfucker out the phone as much as possible so I won't have too much of a repercussion. But, you know, but if you even think about that, and especially, like, even if you look at the numbers, if we go back to the data when it comes to positionality, you know, I said 2.6%, Black Americans own 2.6% of the wealth in the United States versus white Americans owning over 90% of the wealth. So you got like less than $3 trillion to share amongst Black Americans as far as wealth is concerned, and that is mostly in the top 10% of that population versus you know, white Americans are holding over 100 trillion. So again, like, you know, there's still like this huge disconnect as far as like being able to even have some semblance to normalcy to do all the things that you would like to do to get ahead, but there's still so many different factors that keep you from getting ahead.
Yeah.
Well, we've had you here for nearly an hour, Cynthia. I really appreciate you coming. One thing I do want to ask you is, what piece of advice that would you give to, everybody? Obviously, you will be nice to each other and be nice to your friends and stuff. But what, on the particular topic, is there something that you would like to change or something that, we could do to move this forward? Would you have anything like that?
Yeah. Please advocate for reparations, because Black Americans need it.
Yeah.
we need reparations, and yeah, we need reparations. And
I can't remember who it was. I can't remember who it was. It was a clip from the 80s, and someone was talking about reparations, and they said, you know what? If something is owed, just fucking pay it. Like, it's owed. It just is. Okay.
It just is, y'all. And I mean, like, I know I was arguing with somebody on Facebook earlier about this bullshit, and and he gave me the whole race card, 99 tears, all the tropes that you would hear anytime that you would bring up any type of issues concerning Black people. And and I was just like, again, trying to have like a really pointed conversation with you concerning why this is particularly an issue and why this needs to happen. But I can't with you because you're just a dumb fuck. So I'm just going to happen no more. So I just can't. But
flat earther. So
right, I heard. I'm going to listen to that. So I was telling Math Pig like before we started. And he was telling me about all this stuff that happened with the flat earther, and I was telling him how, like, I used to do these speeches for an organization called Ignite Chicago, and it's based like on a 5-minute speech that you can do about anything that you want to talk about, and you had like a PowerPoint playing behind you to kind of color your story, right? And I remember one time I was about to go up, and I think I was going to talk about pronouns, and the person before me was talking about this whole flat Earth thing, and he said that you still have 2% of the American population that actually believe that the Earth is flat. And so I said, before y'all start my time, can I just remark on how scary that is?
Yeah.
I want to say that. I just really want to say that. I mean, like,
I don't. Fuck me for me to say it, but these people get to vote, and it's fucked up. I'm sorry.
Well, have we any questions from the chat before these two women start threatening all the flat earthers?
We're coming for you, flat earthers. And if you never went to the moon, I'm about to bitch slap your ass.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, well, Cynthia, thank you very much for coming. I really do appreciate it. I know that we've tried. The first time I fell asleep, the second time you fell asleep, and then this time Manda fell asleep. So
I blame medication, y'all. But I'm just saying. I'm glad we got a chance to do this.
No, I've been very much looking forward to it. Wanted to talk about this. I wanted to get a better chat with you. As I said, I've seen you about and seen you in bees and stuff, and a lot of fun. Definitely had a lot of fun tonight. And yeah, you're always welcome back. Anything you want to talk about, you need a platform, you want to scream and shout or tell flat earthers they're asshole. Yeah, come on. Amanda, have you anything you'd like to add?
No, I'm good. Thank you, Cynthia, for coming.
Thank you for having me, everybody. Salute, chats.
Everybody, thank you very much for watching, and we'll be back again on Wednesday with Frustrated Atheist, and then on Thursday for the open mic night, which is usually a lot of fun. There's a few new people has appeared in the chat. They might be back on Thursday. That could be could be very interesting. So on that note, everybody, thank you very much again. Huge thanks to my Patreons that are always helping out with the channel and keeping everything going. And yeah, Cynthia's links are in the description. All the bits and bobs are there. Hit the button, and we will oink and out.